This week in economics on the 21st of June 2015. Numbers man here. We'll start today's report with the Federal Reserve Open Market Committee, which released a statement this past week. So we'll start with that, and then we'll move into other things. Let me just preface this with some of the political, we call shenanigans, going around. Donald Trump talking about bubbles and bubbles bursting. Well, bubbles are, in an industrial capitalist society, there's always a situation where there can at times be bubbles. The way that bubbles are addressed is with the proper type of regulatory environment. The better regulatory environment you have, more transparency, etc., the less you will deal with bubbles. Bubbles are brought about by excessive speculation out there and what they normally call risk. Well, the more risk you have, the more chance you have of having a bubble. Nothing new about that. In other words, if there's irrational exuberance in the market, you will have a bubble. Now, this was released on the 17th of June 2015. Information received since the Federal Open Market Committee met in April suggests that economic activity has been expanding modestly, and that is the key, after having changed a little during the first quarter, Q1. The pace of job gains picked up while the unemployment rate, remained steady. On balance, a range of labor market indicators suggests that underutilization of labor resources diminished somewhat. Growth in household spending has been moderated, and the housing sector has shown some improvement. However, business fixed investment and net exports stay soft. Inflation continues to run below the committee's expectation long-run objective, reflecting early declines in heating prices and decreasing price of non-energy imports. Energy prices appear to have stabilized. Market-based measurements of inflation compensation remain low. Survey-based measurements of long-term inflation expectations have remained stable. Consistent with the statutory mandate, the committee seeks to foster maximum employment and price stability. The committee expects that appropriate policy accommodation, economic activity will expand at a modest pace, with labor market indicators continuing to move towards levels the committee judges consistent with its dual mandate. The committee continues to see the risks to the outlook for economic activity and the labor market as nearly balanced. Inflation is anticipated to remain near its recent low levels in the near term, but the committee expects inflation to rise gradually towards a 2% over the medium term as the labor market improves further and the transitory effects of the early declines in energy and import prices dissipate. The committee continues to monitor inflation developments closely to support the continued progress towards maximum employment and price stability. The committee today reaffirms its view that the current 0 to 0.25% target range for the federal fund rates remains appropriate. In determining how long to maintain the target range, the committee will assess progress, both realized and expected, towards its objective of maximum unemployment and 2% inflation. The assessment will take into account a wide range of information, including measurements of labor market conditions, indicators of inflation pressure, inflation expectation, and reading on financial and international developments. The committee anticipates it will be appropriate to raise the target range for the federal fund rates when it sees further improvement in the labor market, and is reasonably confident that inflation will move back to its 2% objective over the medium term. The committee is maintaining its existing policy of reinvesting principal payments from its holdings of agency debt and agency mortgage-backed securities in agency mortgage-backed securities and rolling over maturing treasury securities at auctions. This policy, by keeping the committee's holding of long-term securities at sizable levels, should help maintain the accommodative financial condition. When the committee decided to begin to remove policy accommodation, it will take a balanced approach consisting with its long-term goal of maximum employment and inflation of 2%. The committee currently anticipates that even after employment and inflation are near mandated consistent levels, economic conditions may for some time warrant keeping the target fund rates below the levels the committee views as normal in the long run, and voting for the FOC's monetary policy action. Dr. Yellen, Dudley, Evans, Dr. Fisher, Lacker, Lockhart, Powell, Tatelu, and Williams, and Brainerd. We left him out. So that is where the Federal Open Market Committee is at present time. And the employment situation is one I'm just reading here in the Wall Street Journal. We try to source a number of publications, wire services, papers, etc. in compiling our report. Let me just throw my glasses on here. This is interesting information here. For the past 18 months, Tom Grimler, a recruiter in Chicago, has helped thousands of people find jobs in accounting, finance, and human resources. What really drags is down quite a bit in technology. Gambelt, he's founder and chief executive of Ecel Networks. So many companies are using technology, portals and databases with their people. This is actually how people are recruited. I had an interesting conversation with a worker. We'll get that in a minute. They may be getting better hires out of the process, that they are definitely moving more slowly. The U.S. currently has 5.4 million job openings, the most since the current record-keeping system began in 2000, roughly 15 years ago. But the number of people actually getting hired is yet to fully recover from the recession, that's according to the Labor Department. Two pieces of new research shows that Gimbel's anecdotal impression is correct across the economy. The time it takes to fill jobs is lengthening. The lethargy hiring process has prolonged the already slow pace of labor market healing that has been beset in the U.S. 6 years since the Depression. An economist at the University of Chicago, Stephen Davis, found that as of April, the average job sat vacant for 27.3 days before being filled, nearly double the 15.3 days it took to fill a job in the mid-2009. Davis research regularly as the HI hiring indicator report shows that the rise has occurred across industries, regions, and firms of different sizes. Parts of the increase in vacancies owes to the improvement in the economy. There's simply more openings and fewer candidates. Current labor market conditions have made recruiting talent more challenging. That is from the president of DHI Group. That is a website that teams up with Davis to promote his research on a monthly basis. with several industries hovering around 2% unemployment, such as tech, financial services. Hiring managers and recruiters are taking longer to fill open positions. But the slowdown isn't purely because the economy has improved and there are fewer candidates. Even when qualified candidates apply for a job and ultimately get hired, the process companies use to get them through the door is just basically slowing down. An economist, he's a chief economist at career research firm Glassdoor, said the average interview process in the U.S. took 22.9 days in 2014, up from 12.6 days in 2010. Chamberlain has a prime vantage point there. His firm collects reviews, and this is why I chose this article from workers. About 340,000 reviews have been submitted about job interview process and how long it takes and what steps they are. The Glassdoor's findings are an example of how to harness big data. We talked about big data here. Hundreds of thousands of observers, but not a random sample. Yet the site is large enough to collect reviews across industry. Screening and background checks, in particular, have skyrocketed. In 2014, 42% of U.S. job candidates underwent some type of background check, compared with only 25% in 2010. Last year, 23% received a skills test, up from 16% 5 years ago, and 23% received a drug test, up from 13% in 2010. Many of these factors are just used to screen people out. There's really very little job interest involved there. And we'll get back to this in other broadcasts. The increased length of the job interviewing process occurs in France, Germany, in the UK, Australia, and Canada. That suggests that U.S. labor market healthcare regulations aren't the primary culprit. We've talked about that before. The Affordable Care Act is known as Obamacare. Chamberlain's theory is that the economy shift to more skilled and less routine. We covered routine jobs. The hiring process will naturally get more complicated. Since 2001, all net job growth in the U.S. economy has come from non-routine jobs. That's according to Henry Sue at the University of British Columbia. In their classification system, routine jobs include rule-based tasks such as factory work, forklift operators, bookkeepers, or secretaries. Non-routine jobs, occupations from cleaners, janitors, and home health care aides to computer programmers or financial analysts. That's a kind of interesting distinction there. I would put some of those in routine work, especially the cleaners, and the hotel is a little different there. The growing use of skills tests, background checks, could be a proxy to find higher skilled workers with good judgment. The jobs disappearing from the economy are routine, really simple jobs. The kind of jobs that are booming are jobs that take lots of judgment and creativity. I've seen this out there more and more. And when we speak of simple jobs and much of quote-unquote routine type of thinking involved there, we are not talking about a class in logic. We're talking more about simplified tasks that are above so-called quote-unquote common sense, which in itself is not very common. So this is some of the reason. In other words, the process, and the young man I was talking with had went through this process. Very frustrating indeed for him, going through that type of process and having to be victimized by it. Let's move on here to